Welcome to an MS Fusion News Summit. All right, this is called the MS Summit Denver. My name is Stuart Schlossman, not Denver. I want to let you all know that this event is sponsored by numerous pharmaceutical companies tonight, and I wanted to let you know who they are. We have Bristol Myers Squibb, Genentech, and Sandoz are all sponsors of the program itself. And our exhibiting sponsors, we have Alexion, Biogen, Bristol Myers Squibb, Genentech, Ecometrics, because I always say it wrong, Novartis, and Sandoz. And then we have in-kind sponsors, the National MS Society from this great area of that we're in right now, and the Rocky Mountain MS Center all helped us to provide tonight's program. Let's give them a round of applause. I want to introduce Dr. Sonia Asqui, serves as Vice President and U.S. Head of Biosimilars and Specialty at Sandoz. In this role, she champions and leads the biosimilar and specialty business in support of bringing critical treatments to patients. Prior to Sandoz, Sonia was Vice President of Biosimilars for Cardinal Health, where she led the enterprise biosimilar strategy on behalf of providers, patients, and life science companies. I'm not going to keep going on and on and on. We have a lot to discuss here. Let's bring up Sonia, and you're next to speak.
Thank you so much, and thank you all. It's an honor to be here, and what a humbling experience, and I've been learning a lot throughout the evening. I'm excited to be here to talk a little bit about biosimilars, which is an area that I'm clearly passionate about, given my career in this space and focus on these critical treatments. And it's probably a new terminology for you all, and which is not unexpected. I'm very excited to talk about it because this is the first time we're going to actually experience having biosimilars in the neurology community. We'll start with what is a biologic, very foundational because that's going to inform what biosimilars are and how they come to market. So biologics, as a reminder for some of you, these are treatments that are created from living cells. And these are often used to treat some of the most critical, chronic, severe conditions out there. It can be used to treat them, diagnose them, even prevent them. This includes conditions like from diabetes care to cancers, to immunology conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and Crohn's disease, and of course neurology conditions now that we'll soon see, like multiple sclerosis. So what's key to keep in mind when we talk about biologic treatments is that termed, the couple terms where they're made from living cells. That is key to how these products are made. Biologics overall have revolutionized treatment options for these conditions. I mean, people that were unable to live healthy, happy lives were now able to do so for much longer time periods because of the entrance of biologics. So what is a biosimilar? A biosimilar is a FDA-approved biologic, like we just talked about, that is highly similar to an existing FDA-approved biologic on the market. You could think of the relationship like a brand to a generic. We all know what brands are and then the generics. And probably the most common question is, well, why don't we just call it a generic? Because it's the same type of relationship. And the main reason for that is when we talk about branded generic drugs, these are products that are made from chemicals. So they're not made from these living cells like I talked about. So when you manufacture branded generics, you could essentially copy and paste and build these batches of these medications that are nearly identical, right? Because they're made from chemicals. Because biologics are made from living cells, when you manufacture them, there's always inherent variability in these cells because they're made from those living cells. So the best you could do is make highly similar versions of a biologic. And one of my favorite analogies, it's like making wine. You could pick grapes from the same part of a vineyard, same time of year, same locations, and make bottles of wine. And they're each gonna have slight variation in them because they're made from living cells, the grapes, right? So it's the same concept here. You literally can't get the identical matches, hence the terminology biosimilar. But the relationship, you could think of it as a brand to a generic. And the promise around biosimilars, which I'll talk quite a bit about today, is about bringing lower cost, high quality treatment options. Again, just like what generics did to the pharmaceutical market. What's important to note is that for biosimilars to be FDA approved, they must show that they are just as safe and effective as the biologic that's on the market. So they have the same rigorous, high quality standards by the FDA that these originator biologics have. And I want to be clear that when I say originator biologic or brand biologic, reference biologic, these are all the same thing. It's the brand biologic that's already on the market. Oftentimes, biologics are administered via injection or infusion. That's the most common form for biologics today. I'm going to give a little bit of history on how we started to get biosimilars in the US. If we take a step back, this isn't going to be shocking to anybody, but the US has the highest pharmaceutical prices in the world. And biologics are the most expensive drug category. So as revolutionary as biologics have been to the treatment of many of these conditions, they cost a lot. And many patients, unfortunately, cannot even afford them, which creates challenges for accessing these critical treatments. So to create a biosimilars approval pathway in the US, this pathway was established under the Affordable Care Act in 2009. Then it was implemented in 2010 under the Biologics Price Competition and Innovation Act. So this is what created the regulatory approval pathway for the FDA to approve biosimilars. And the whole concept and the goal around biosimilars, again, is by getting biosimilars approved, you increase competition to some of the most costly biologic treatments out there. And when you increase competition, you're lowering costs and then enhancing access and affordability to these critical treatments. So in the US, the first biosimilar was approved in 2015, which was for an oncology supportive care agent, and it was Sandoz launched the first one in that area. And since then, we've had many more approvals, which I'll touch on what that landscape looks like today. All right, as mentioned, really the key promise around biosimilars is around bringing affordability and accessibility to these critical treatments. And since we've had the first biosimilar approved and on the market since 2015, we've seen that promise of biosimilars come to fruition in the US. So for example, patients who took certain biosimilars paid on average up to 45% less out of pocket than those who took the reference product or the branded product that was already on the market. In 2021, if you look at generic and biosimilar medicines as a whole together, they saved the US healthcare system over $370 billion. So the promise of these agents are actually coming to fruition, and there's much more to go as we have more and more biosimilars come to market. One thing I really want to highlight here too that also gets me excited and passionate about biosimilars is what they do to foster innovation. So you all may recall on the previous slide where I mentioned the regulatory approval pathway for biosimilars, what the act was called, included the word innovation in it, right? It's the Biologics Price Competition and Innovation Act that created this pathway. And the word innovation is in there for a reason. So naturally, when you're increasing competition in the market, and this is like a typical business concept too. When you increase competition in any forum, that always generates innovation. You're going to create new solutions, new products, new ideas. And that goes the same here. So the whole concept too with biosimilars is as you increase competition, what you're doing, like I said, is you lower costs. And what that does, it frees up the healthcare dollar to invest in newer treatments where we could do research. We were just hearing about biomarkers and all these new exciting advancements. It allows us to have the budget to invest in those sort of things so we have even better treatment options coming out in the future. It's the same healthcare dollar, right? So very exciting to have the investment there where not only do we have biosimilars, the original biologics on the market, but you have these newer innovative treatments that not only just treat and extend quality of life, but we work towards a cure, right? Ultimately, that's the goal. This will probably look hard to read for those that are far away, but I'm just going to speak to it. It's more for visual purposes to show where are we today in the US landscape with biosimilars. Like I mentioned, we had the first one approved in 2015. We now have nearly 40 FDA-approved biosimilars. Close to 30 of them are actually on the market. Vast majority of the biosimilar experience in the US so far has been in the oncology space. Additionally, and you have autoimmune biosimilars. Those are treat immunology conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, GI conditions. We have more recently insulin biosimilars, and probably most recent ophthalmology biosimilars for retina conditions. So you see biosimilars are coming more and more across different therapeutic areas, which is very exciting. So some of you might be saying, okay, why do we have 40 FDA approved biosimilars, but only about 30 of them are actually on the market? And there's multiple reasons that could delay a launch, meaning a product actually coming to market despite being approved. But one of the most common reasons here is actually due to the patent landscape in the US. So if we take a step back, in the US, biologics, if I'm creating a brand new biologic treatment, I discovered it, or I'm bringing it to market, you get 12 years of market exclusivity. That means you can't have biosimilar competition for at least 12 years. It's almost like the incentive to invest and do the research. And I mean, these takes hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to bring a biologic to market, given how complex they are. So you have 12 years of market exclusivity. We have sometimes these biologics have additional patents on different features of the product. This could be from a device to what's in the formulation. Does it have citrate? These different quality attributes that could extend the exclusivity period. So in some scenarios, which we have in the market today, there's biologics that have not had any competition for over 20 years. So it becomes a big challenge. So those are products like you see on this slide where they are approved but not launched yet. It's because there's patent settlements that have delayed the launch of these biosimilars. This is actually a really big challenge in bringing biosimilars and fulfilling the promise of biosimilars in the US. In fact, so it's really a key topic around policy discussions as well, where there's a lot of aim to not delay competition from lower cost, high quality alternatives due to the patent system in the US. And this is, I would say, especially unique in the US. So to give us a little bit more proof points around the accessibility and affordability component of biosimilars. Like I said, we've now in the US have had biosimilars since 2015, and they've been used in more than 364 million days of patient therapy and over 150 additional days of therapy that otherwise would not have been provided. I mean, that's incredible. And I think the later half of that sentence is what really gets me excited about these products. We're saying that there's over 150 additional days of therapy that otherwise would not have been provided if there was not this lower cost, high quality treatment option with biosimilars. So patients who couldn't either afford the treatment or because of the cost, these products weren't brought to patients as an earlier option when it could have been because of cost. So really, really big promise there. As a result of the increased biosimilars, there's an additional 1.2 million patients that could gain access to critical biologic medicines they need by 2025. One thing I do want to call out here is we're focused on the US market, and we're talking about the first approval being in 2015 and all the opportunity. If we take a global perspective, the US is by no means the leader in this space. I would say oftentimes even, and it's valid, even I always think the US is the first to do something. We're very advanced, we innovate, we research, we discover. When it comes to biosimilars, we're actually a little late to the game. The most prevalent and well-experienced biosimilars users are really in the European market. So the first biosimilar globally was approved in 2006. So we have over 15 years of biosimilar experience, close to 1 billion patient days globally of use with biosimilars. And the first biosimilar approved was in a human growth hormone category. Again, another Sandoz product who, as a company, has pioneered a lot of these treatment options. So there's a wealth of experience even beyond the US. So when we talk about looking at data or real world evidence, this is a great additional data set to look beyond just the US borders. As we look ahead, there's approximately 120 products that are likely to lose exclusivity, which then allows a path for biosimilars to come to market. So as you think about all these even newer treatments, the newer biologics that are out there for multiple sclerosis and other neurologic conditions, as those exclusivity periods end, which remember they have at minimum 12 years of exclusivity, then you have the path for biosimilars to come to market. So again, this is almost like when we think back to the days, whether you experienced it or heard about it, when people say, oh, I remember when generics first came out. I feel like we're going through that whole experience and feeling with biosimilars, where, again, the same type of promise that these lower cost, high quality treatment options can bring. So why are we here and talking about it? Of course, I'm excited, like I said earlier, that the promise of biosimilars is now going to be coming to the neurology space. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here when we talk about costs being a challenge at times and really making it hard to access critical treatments. So a few statistics here. We know out-of-pocket costs for medications to treat neurological conditions, such as multiple sclerosis, have really increased significantly over the past decade. It's estimated that medical costs associated with living with multiple sclerosis are more than $65,000 each year when you compare it to medical costs for those that do not have multiple sclerosis. And the estimated annual cost of treating neurologic disorders in the US is more than $500 billion. So again, a huge economic burden associated with these conditions in which the biosimilars are aimed to bring more affordable treatment options in this space. So for awareness, in 2022, Sandoz, we announced that the FDA, we filed a biologic license application for the first biosimilar for a neurology biologic. And this is for natalizumab, which the brand is Tysabri, which some of you may be familiar with, to treat all the same indications as the reference biologic of natalizumab, and for relapsing forms of multiple sclerosis. So if and when this product is approved, it will be the first biosimilar available in the neurology space, which then gives the potential to increase access to this treatment option while also delivering savings for the healthcare system. So very excited to bring this across additional therapeutic areas. All right, ultimately, when we take a look at all the different biosimilars that have come out, I mentioned oncology, rheumatology, ophthalmology, diabetes. Oftentimes when we bring a new biosimilar to market and it's in a different therapeutic area, naturally people want to know, well, how did this play out in the other areas? Like, how did oncologists feel? How did oncology patients feel? How did rheumatology patients feel and providers? And I would say each product and therapeutic area kind of has its unique and own experience. But what we do know across all therapeutic areas is how critical proactive education is in this space to develop that comfort and familiarity with biosimilars and being prepared when they come to market. So for example, patient caretakers, we talked about prescribers, having an awareness of what these products are, having the confidence in the safety and efficacy as they have to be as the original biologic on the market to be approved is absolutely critical to maximizing the value of biosimilars in the US. And there's a lot of different forums to get educational material on biosimilars. Of course, there's manufacturer material like Sandoz. We have some, others do as well in the biosimilar space, trade organizations. But I do also want to highlight the FDA. I would say that the FDA was not typically a place that populations, family, friends would go to look for education. The FDA has intentionally taken a lot of effort to develop biosimilar education for patients, providers, different stakeholder types, and it's phenomenal resources there. So I highly encourage you all to check out the FDA's resources as well to gain a better understanding of what these treatment options are. And at the end of the day, again, it's all around having the clinical confidence that can allow adoption when appropriate and where appropriate for these treatment options. So I'm going to summarize. I told you I'd keep it short and sweet since it's the end of the night. But what do people living with MS need to know? So first and foremost, as a Cliff Note version of a Biosimilars 101, it's important to know that biosimilars are safe, effective, FDA-approved biologics that are intended to generate savings for patients in the overall healthcare system. Next is improving biosimilar education and awareness among patients and providers will be absolutely key to maximizing the value of these products and enhancing access and supporting the adoption of biosimilars in the US. We want to see continued investment in this space for biosimilars because, again, ultimately we want that healthy competition in the US market, which then helps create more affordability for these products. And lastly, biosimilars stimulate innovation by creating competition, which again frees up the healthcare dollar by lowering those costs to invest in the next generation of critical treatments. So with that, it's short and sweet, and I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. All right, first I have a question from online, and that is, biosimilars are great for the U.S. healthcare system. They have been highly used in Europe for years. Why are so many U.S. healthcare providers not welcoming them with open arms?
It's such a good question, and it goes to the point where I said each therapeutic area in biosimilars kind of has its own dynamic around it. In the oncology space, we saw much earlier and faster adoption of biosimilars than we did in rheumatology, for example. And I'll just use this as an example. In oncology, there's many drivers that supported adoption of biosimilars. From a physician standpoint, oncologist standpoint, for example, the clinical guidelines, the national guidelines for treating different cancers were earlier to adopt biosimilars. And when you think about cancers and different indications, oncologists are almost used to a rapidly evolving treatment paradigm and new innovative treatments coming and doing trials. So they're a little bit more in the nature to be earlier adopters of newer treatment options. There are also reimbursement models that drove support of biosimilars in the oncology space as well, quite a bit compared to other therapeutic areas. So there's different nuances in them. In rheumatology, for example, you could think of some of the disease dynamics. So in rheumatology, these are often chronic long-term treatment options. So for providers who may be newer to biosimilars or patients that are newer to biosimilars, they might feel less comfortable switching from the product they're on, from the originator biologic to the biosimilar, versus if you're a new patient, newly diagnosed, you feel more comfortable starting on a biosimilar. So when you have a rheumatologic condition, it's chronic and long-term, you often aren't switching. You have a less new start patient population compared to, for example, in cancers where there's much more new diagnoses every year, where you have an opportunity to have new patients start on biosimilars. So these are some of the examples of why each product and therapeutic area differ and why you see some provider types being more willing and wanting to adopt earlier.
Any questions out here?
If you're a person living with MS, how do you know if you're on a biologic? Like, how would you have that conversation maybe with a healthcare provider?
It's a really, yeah. I mean, with your healthcare provider, most likely would be the best immediate source. So if there's a treatment option that you're being exposed to or that you've been on, I think that conversation is completely appropriate. And of course, I'm a pharmacist by background. I would always say your pharmacist will absolutely know too. I mean, even your community pharmacist, even if that's not where you're getting an infusion, but you have healthcare providers that will easily be able to tell you. And then in the MS space, of course, once we have the biosimilar available, physicians or your healthcare providers will also hopefully be exposed and understand that there's a biosimilar option when treated on the appropriate originator biologic. But that's probably going to be your best source. And again, FDA, if you have something, you Google it, it'll probably quickly show up in the FDA reference, which is called the Purple Book. So if you look up FDA Purple Book, that's the repository which shows all biologics that are FDA approved.
Thank you. And I have a question for you. And how are the payers, the insurance companies, how are they responding with all of this? And like, if your doctor wants to prescribe this for you, how are you going to get it approved?
It is a very good question, which varies, again, by treatments, and the dynamics have been evolving. I would say in oncology, we're seeing more and more what we call parity status from payers, where they cover the originator biologic and biosimilars at the same level. So they say you could use any one. They're all covered and reimbursed at the same level, versus certain options, biologic options, or we saw it more, especially earlier on in the rheumatology space. They would say, well, we prefer this product, the originator or the brand. This would be a step below the brand. So it depends on the payer and the health plan. But that naturally does become a challenge. So it depends on your insurance company, which state or region you are. Sometimes on your annual coverage, it could evolve. And it's definitely a key consideration that could help support or create challenges to biosimilar adoption.
Person wants to know, how do they get their doctor who may not be in favor of a biosimilar to get them to understand it more?
I mean, the educational resources are huge. So there's a few ways that we've seen, for example, physician hesitation originally with biosimilars be overcome, and that is through a lot of educational tools and resources, which, especially those that come from what I'll say are perceived as unbiased information, like the FDA and those that are approving these biosimilars. I think also what we've seen, and studies have shown this, real world evidence and seeing peers utilize biosimilars goes a long way. There's been studies that shown that pure utilization of a treatment influences prescribing behavior more than clinical guidelines. So when you have other experiences, for example, even outside of the neurology space of utilization of biosimilars, that can help drive confidence. So the use in oncology or rheumatology, and even ex-US experiences I mentioned, those type of experiences can also help support the education process.
Okay, thank you. Next one. How many MS biologics have lost their patent protection, and how many more will lose it protection in the next 2 years? Do you have this answer?
I don't have the exact number, but I could tell you for now the first biologic, the one that I mentioned that we have a biosimilar candidate for, is the first one that will have a biosimilar. There are biologics, naturally additional biologics that are used to treat multiple sclerosis, where in the pipeline there are more biosimilars in development for those, but I don't have an exact number for you.
Okay, thank you. And the last question comes and its person wrote, would you agree that a brand biologic is a biosimilar within itself?
Oh, this is such a well-informed question, whoever asked that. And yes, I would. And the reason why I would do that is because it's the wine analogy, right? Where I said, even if you pick the same grape, same kind of, time of year, and you build these bottles, they're all going to have slight variation. That's the same thing. If you take a branded biologic and you're manufacturing them, each batch that you make is going to have that slight variation because those are also made from living cells. So that's where that question comes from. Wouldn't you just consider even that a biosimilar of itself? And that's why I say, yes, I would. I mean, these are all biosimilars because you can't make an identical match when you're manufacturing from living cells.
Great, thank you. And another one that just asked, are there patient assistance, financial programs for biosimilar medications?
Yeah, so that's really the decision from the biosimilar manufacturer on how you commercialize these products in the market. I could only speak from Sandoz perspective, and from our perspective is yes, our intention and our approach to bring these products to market is to ensure patients have the same experience that they would expect with the originator biologic. So that includes patient support services, copay assistance, anything that's needed to help support get access to these critical treatments.
All right. Well, I'm going to say thank you very much for being here.
Thank you all.
So again, though, for tonight, I do want to thank our sponsors. I mean, it was very important. It was very nice that they were here with us. And our sponsors for tonight, we had Sandoz, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Genentech. So let's give them a round of applause. And let's say good night, world. It's late, especially for those in New York. Oh my gosh.